How is it going, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to another gun science video here on the channel. Today we are going to be testing I don't know if I want to say a myth that I've heard a handful of times, that when shooting .22, subsonic ammo is often more accurate than supersonic ammo. And this is specifically true for .22 because of its lightweight and not super great ballistic coefficient. When a round surpasses the speed of sound, you actually have to overcome a pressure barrier. So a lot of .22 that's supersonic is really just above that supersonic speed of 1125 feet per second. So not only does it have to accelerate past that, but it also will quickly decelerate back below that and become subsonic again, meaning that that pressure barrier it encounters can often mess up its trajectory and sometimes cause it to tumble. So long story short, that's what I'm trying to prove here today. So I've got the Rock Island Armory TM22 here. I've got it painted camo. If you want to check out the video where I show you how I specifically paint my guns, feel free. I'll try to link it here. And before all of you comment and say, why do you have that dumb riser on there plus extra tall scope rings? Well, there's two reasons for that. First of all, it's all I had to mount the scope. Second of all, I put that riser on there because I wanted some way to quick disconnect the whole optic, because with these Rock Island Armory TM22s, you have to actually pull the top rail just to get the bolt out and clean it and all that stuff. So kind of a design flaw there. I'm looking to maybe upgrade from this and go back to my Ruger 1022 that I like shooting so much, but it doesn't have a threaded barrel, which makes shooting suppressed a little bit impossible. So once I get the threaded barrel for that, probably abandon this, but for now it's a great option. I've got my Bushnell Banner 2 up top there, the Magpul bipod on the front. I swapped the stock for a Magpul fixed stock, and then I got my two magazines there. Those are 10-round magazines from the factory, but I learned that if you actually just press a little bit harder, you can get an 11th round in there, and I didn't have any problem cycling, so pretty good to know there. So without further ado, let's get into the action here. You'll have to bear with me. I don't know why my scope camera is getting a little washed out there at the end, so you can't see the impacts as good as I normally would like to. So here I'm just sighting in the TM22 since I had to take the optic off again, like I said, to clean it. So I'm just verifying my zero. This is at 75 yards with 40 grain subsonic. I stuck a camera downrange as well while I was there because I was curious to pick up some of the noise differences between the subsonic and the supersonic. Alright, so it's about time we get to the meat and potatoes of this video. So the whole point here is trying to determine if subsonics are more accurate than supersonics of the same bullet, first of all, and second of all, if the subs and the supers have a huge difference in drop once you go out to 100 yards or so. Now obviously my zero is at 75, so we'll see if the zero is different. I have it zeroed with subs. We'll check with supers and see how much different that is, and we'll go from there. So let's start with some subsonic. Here's our 75-yard subsonic group. I got a 1.82 inch group at the max spread. Not a bad group for what we got going on here. Of course, I've got this thing zeroed or close to zeroed for subsonic at 75 yards. It's what I would use for hunting, and of course I got it set up for subsonic because if the ATF ever decides I'm not a bad person and they give me my suppressor, it would be great to have. So let's go on to supers at 75. Here we can see our 75-yard supersonic group. We got a 1.652 inch group here, which is about 2/10 better than our subsonic group. Now 2/10 you may be able to say is negligible, but the whole point here is that we're trying to compare and see if supersonic is less accurate than subs, and at this point this is disproving that. This may be because the supers haven't had a chance to cross that super to subsonic deceleration range, but we will back up to 100 yards and find out. Alright, backing up to 100 yards with subs, we widened our group out to 2.854 inches, and you can see we got a little bit of drop here. We'll look at the drop here in a second. Now that group is also a little bit shifted to the right. I'm going to make excuses and say that it's the rotational drift or the spin drift of the bullet, but really I'm sure that doesn't affect it. I probably just need to zero my gun a little bit better. So now let's take a look at the drop. Alright, our average group drop here on our point of aim with 100 yard subs is about 3.14 inches. Now, a little bit that contributes to that is that the scope I had on my TM22 at the time had a almost 4-inch rise off the barrel, which is absurd if you have ever measured that. 4 inches is extremely high. My 1022 has a 2-inch rise over bore on the scope, and so with that I'd probably be in the range of like 4.5-inch drop at 100 yards. But 3.14 inches at a 100 yard drop is not bad for a Subsonic 22. Switching to supers at 100 yards, our group widened out to a 3.523 inch group. Now that's actually a significant increase in group. We went from 2.8 to 3.5, which is pretty big. Now if you look in the middle, a lot of them are concentrated in about half the size of this, but you do get a handful of flyers that widen this out. Now if we take out our horizontal flyers and just get a vertical spread group, we've got a 2.237, which is comparable if not a little bit tighter than the Subsonic group at 100 yards. So you'll have to draw your own conclusions from that. If you're willing to sacrifice a couple flyers here and there when they're probably running into that transition from Supersonic to Subsonic, then maybe this is what you want to do. But in my case, I like a more consistent group. Now let's take a quick look at the drop here because something interesting happened. So our drop with supers at 100 yards actually increased to 4.024 inches, which is just about 100,000 shy of an entire inch increase over the Subsonics. Now I've done a little bit of research on my ballistic calculator and I really can't find any good answers for this, so maybe if you guys have some good answers you could let me know. The Subsonics, I believe, were hollow points, and these may have been round nose bullets without that hollow point. So I'm not sure how that would increase your drop. I'm not sure how I got an increased drop with the Supersonics here. So if somebody smarter than me wants to chime in the comments or something and let me know what I did wrong or what's going on, feel free. I'd be glad to learn. Alright, as one more treat for you guys, I shot some Federal Punch flat nose 22. It's some 29 grain stuff, a lot higher velocity. This is just kind of to extrapolate on the velocity trend. What I had before was supersonic. This is extra supersonic, so I wanted to see what it would do. So again, at 100 yards, let's see what kind of group we get. Alright, so there's a more finite answer for you. If you were wondering if a 22 rifle rather would take the light grain stuff at a higher velocity or the heavier grain stuff at a slower velocity, there's your answer. My calipers do not even stretch to cover this group at 100 yards. It stretched out to about 6.094 inches and was still about 3/4 of an inch shy of that top bullet hole there. So it did not like the lighter grain Federal Punch at all at 100 yards. So it may perform better in a situation where you need a higher velocity 22 long rifle or maybe a pistol or something like that. But at least in this case, that is not what you want. So general conclusion, heavier grain, slower bullet, works a little bit better, at least in my rifle, and I'm assuming most rifles. And if you couldn't tell from the last clip, I was actually aiming at the lower target here. So more to my expectation, this Supersonic group did actually have a rise. It's hard to judge an average group here, but I took my best shot at it, and it looks like our average rise above point of aim was 4.382 inches, which is extreme when I was having some 3 to 4 inch drops at 100 yards with the other rounds. So this stuff is just absolutely cooking, I guess, but there you go. Alright, so conclusion time. here's the ultimate conclusion. Just go out and shoot your gun with the different grains and see what works best in it. Obviously, in my case, most average 22 rifles are going to shoot a higher grain, slower bullet more accurately. And that's just science, you know. If you get a light grain bullet out in the wind and flying a million miles an hour, it's going to have a little bit of trouble keeping up with something that's twice as heavy, going slower, not dealing with the same wind and subsonic, supersonic transitions, all that kind of stuff. So that's the general conclusion. But at the end of the day, if you want the best groups, just go out, shoot a bunch of ammo, get some practice, and, you know, your groups will improve by the end of the day. So there you have it. If you like my half kinda-ish science reviews here, then feel free to subscribe. I always appreciate it. I'd like to provide you guys more content and stuff, so the more people that subscribe and the like, the more I can do that. So thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. And that's it.